Hey there, thanks for coming. Take a seat.
It's time to retire to the drawing room.
You're never too young or too old to take positive career action. Michelle Gibbings and Rupert French know all about building careers and how to still get a good job after the age of 50. Thank you to both of you for coming in.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Patricia.
In this day and age, do we still talk about careers, given that many of us change jobs more frequently?
I think very much we're talking about careers. Now, a career doesn't mean getting into one job and having it for life. Career means managing your working life, perhaps your interaction with the community, from when you become independent to when you cease to be independent.
So the concept of a career being one thing or one topic is the thing that's being disrupted, isn't it, Michelle?
Absolutely. I mean, if I look at my career, where I started and where I am now, I could never have predicted that I would be doing the sort of role that I am now. And so I often say to people when I'm talking to them about career transition that think about your career in terms of what you really like and also the longevity that you're going to have in that, and be open to the experience and be comfortable to take the risk. Because often when you do something that's new, there's an element of risk attached to it. And when you can embrace the risk, then it opens up a whole new field of things that you could possibly do.
It is about risk. And are people still frightened of taking that risk, Rupert?
Oh, certainly. I find that job seekers are worried about taking the risk of rejection. That goes to when they're doing things like information interviews. The very concept of setting up an interview and then going and attending it fills them with dread, and that is something that I try and coach them through, is being able to take that risk and getting a positive buzz from doing so.
Michelle, you're all about networking, and I've had a few friends recently, I feel pretty connected to this issue, who've been trying to get into new careers and realising that networking, actually knowing the people in that particular industry, is pretty much the most important part of it all.
Oh, absolutely. At the end of the day, you get the job because you can do the job. But the foot in the door is often someone who's made the referral in or who has made the connection. And that's where things like LinkedIn are really good, because if you're on LinkedIn, you can see who you know, but you can also see who they know. And sometimes it's not your direct connection, but you want to go to that person and say, hey, you know this person, I need to meet them. Can you make the introduction for me? And then when you're building those networks, you always need to do it from the position of what can you give before you're asking for something? And it's taking that very long-term view of the relationship, because if you burn bridges and burn your network, it's a small market. People find out and you need to protect your reputation.
What if you're just not that type? I mean, the networking type. I know some people struggle with networking and yet they are brilliant workers. They have amazing skills. And it does seem unfortunate that you have to be, good at the selling yourself part when you are a very effective worker.
Yeah, and I think part of it is also understanding what's your value proposition, what do you stand for and how do you add value? And so when I work with people, I often get them to really get clear on that, because when they're clear on that, they're much more comfortable than talking about what they do. The best networkers are the people who do it from the basis of, they're genuinely interested in the other person. Whereas sometimes you'll come across people and the way they network, it feels really swanny. There's no genuine connection there. They're not interested in you. It's all about what they can get and as quickly as they can get it. And I always say to people, it's much better to go slowly and build really strong relationships that go the distance rather than go in, go hard. But in fact, all you're doing is actually building something that feels very temporary and very transactional, as opposed to saying, I actually want to build a relationship with you because you matter, and I actually think this relationship is going to be something that both of us benefit from.
Rupert, is networking high on your suggestion list?
Oh, absolutely. I think it is the key to getting a job. And people say that it's not what you know, it's who you know. Well, it's not even that really. It's who knows you and who knows what you're worth, who likes you. The aim of the job seeker is to build relationships all the way through with everybody that he or she runs into, building a network of people who think that the job seeker is worthwhile. Yeah, you can't do it without it.
But it does seem a bit unfair. Shouldn't it be more about your skills, your ability to do the job, not about who you know? There's something dangerous about that, isn't it?
No, it's not. Richard Branson's often quoted as saying, At Virgin, we hire for attitude. If they've got the right attitude, we can give them the skills. If they've got the wrong attitude, it doesn't matter how skillful they are. Employers are looking for three things in every applicant for every position. First and least important, the skills to do the job. Least important, not unimportant, but least important. Second, far more important, the motivation to do the job well. And third, equally far more important, the ability to fit well into their team. And if you're motivated for the job and you're seen as someone who's keen to be part of the team, they will like you. If you get someone who's very skillful but who won't fit into the team, they will be a liability. They will spoil the team. They will make the team less efficient.
Back to the networking idea. If we want to improve our network, what's the first step we should take? I mean, you mentioned LinkedIn, for instance.
LinkedIn is really important. And I often say to people, I use LinkedIn as my business card holder. So as soon as I meet with someone that night, I'll go home and I'll connect with them on LinkedIn. And it's personal. You don't just do the standard kind of hit the connect button. You do a personalised message as to why you want to maintain that relationship. And the best thing about LinkedIn is what it means is when that person moves to a new role, in a new organisation, you've still got their contact details. Whereas, the whole kind of Rolodex of cards, people move careers, they move jobs, they move countries. It's quite a transient workforce sometimes, and it's very easy for people to move on. I always have to say with people, start small. If they don't feel comfortable doing the kind of big networking events, you don't need to do that. It can be as simple as just catching up with someone and having a cup of coffee. And I've always found that people are really interested in talking about themselves. And so if you approach someone on the basis of, I'd love to catch up with you because I can see that you do this, I'm really interested in that industry and I'd love to learn from you. Would you have time to catch up and have a coffee with me? And then you always pay for coffee and you always do it in a way that's convenient for them because they're putting themselves out by giving you some of their time, and then be grateful for that. So start small and keep it really simple so that you feel comfortable doing it. But one of the points I'd love to pick up on, which Rupert was talking on about before in relation to people hire for fit, and I absolutely agree, people do hire for fit. The danger though when they always just look for hiring like-minded people is that we lose diversity and diversity of thought, because sometimes people hire people that they feel comfortable with, when in fact what you actually need in the team is someone who's going to challenge how you think and challenge how you approach things. And you get that when you've got a diverse team from different backgrounds and different experiences.
I was going to pick up on that too. So we're on the same wavelength, because you run the risk of groupthink as well. Everyone's coming up with the same answer, and sometimes that answer is the same answer that everyone's been coming up with for a very long time, and not necessarily the right answer. Rupert, is that important too, that to make your network diverse, to think outside the box, to actually sometimes think about that person who's going to come in and actually be a bit of a game changer?
The answer to that is yes, but probably not as important for the job seeker as it is for the employer. The job seeker is looking for a job where he or she is going to fit in well, but getting diversity is not the job seeker's role. That's the employer's role.
If you're just tuning in, you're in the drawing room, and my guest is Rupert French. He's the author of How to Get a Good Job After 50, and Michelle Gibbings, who's the author of Step Up. So, Michelle, we talked before about taking risks, and I think it's really obvious to people that taking risks is such a fundamentally important thing. But risks do potentially also mean no wages. They can be costly, especially if those risks fail. And of course, inherent in risk is failure. A risk that has no risk of failure is not really a risk at all, is it?
Yeah. And look, and it depends on how also with risk. So I often see risk from a learning perspective as well. So if I go back through my career, some of the roles that I did had enormous stretch in them. And I remember saying to one of my girlfriends once that one of my mottos when I was applying for a role, that if I didn't apply for a role that made me want to feel nauseous, it meant that I wasn't pushing myself hard enough, because you do get that uncomfortable feeling when you know you're doing something that you haven't done before. And I often say to people, that's a good thing. Embrace that discomfort, because it's telling you that you're pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone. And so taking a risk, it's a calculated risk, but you're doing it so that you're broadening your horizons and doing things that you haven't done before. And that might be you're moving to a new geography, or you're moving into an industry that you hadn't moved before. I know for me personally, I took a risk when I left corporate to set up my own business. But I did it in a planned way. I knew that if the business wasn't at a certain level within a certain time span, then I would go back to corporate. But I had sat down and thought about the consequences and risks, and I knew that when it would work, that it would pay off in terms of where it was going to take me from a career perspective.
So, Rupert, is it only sometimes those who are pretty comfortable already that can place themselves in this kind of financially risky position?
No, because there are a number of people that are placed in that position through restructuring and redundancy or involuntary leaving the job. The risks that job seekers take are not so much financial ones as social, psychological risks, which are just as hard to bear. Obviously, finance is something that they need to manage. I had a client once who had just been made redundant from a very high-paying job, and he was about to pull his children out of private school and about to pull his wife out of the course she was doing. And I said, hey, hang on a bit. You've got a redundancy. That redundancy payment is not capital to be shoved in the bank. That is to cover your living expenses until you get a new job. Now, you're a marketable person. You're going to get a new job. Put your money, budget it so that it's over, say, 13 weeks, and within 13 weeks you'll get a job. Sure, there's a risk there because you can't guarantee you're going to get a job in 13 weeks. But if you do things right, it's very unlikely that you won't get a job in 13 weeks, whether it's a senior management or sort of an entry-level job. It sort of doesn't matter. If you go around the job search the right way, you'll get a job within 13 weeks.
So, Michelle, are the challenges for achieving a rewarding career or that change that we're talking about, are they the same for younger and older employees? Because there is this other thing, this kind of elephant in the room, which we haven't even touched yet, which is age discrimination. Now, people are reporting it. There's anecdotal evidence. There's some genuine evidence. People are experiencing this.
Yeah, and look, and it's interesting. I think when you look sort of through different generations of people when they're in the workforce, they approach it differently. And even statistics will show you that. You know, typically people when they're younger, they'll move and rotate through careers at a much faster rate. As you get older, you tend to have longer tenure in roles because often of circumstances. You know, it's easier once you're in a role to stay there in terms of managing life outside of work. And certainly what I've seen is a number of people as they've gotten older is they're almost developing adjunct careers where they'll go into consulting or they'll set up a practice which is very focused on an area that they were their specialty or their sort of functional discipline when they were in corporate. And I think what's becoming harder is if you look at the statistics about the casualisation of the workforce and the fact that we're moving to a much more flexible workforce, that does create challenges, I think, for older people in the workforce who might have been used to, I come in every day and I work in the same organisation for a period of time, as opposed to I'm going to pick up work where I can get it. So the importance of really understanding your ability to sell yourself into a market becomes important across all generations, but I think it's probably something that is a newer skill for different demographics.
Rupert, you're the author of How to Get a Job After 50, so this is your specialty, really. What would be your biggest tip for doing this for people who are getting older?
If I could pick up a line of Michelle's, I can get a job where I can get it, the answer is yes, there is discrimination, but there is also strong evidence that there are employers out there who would prefer to hire someone over 50 to someone under 30. So it's a matter of finding the people who want to hire the older people. That's where the research comes in and the networking. You do the networking and the research and you find a business that wants you and would value you.
Just quickly, Michelle, before we wrap up, can your network ever be too big?
Oh, interesting question. Look, it's interesting. It's also about depth of relationship. You can have a massive network and you can know oodles of people, but do you really know them?
Yeah,
And
there
are
can be lots of meaningless relationships.
Exactly. And are they a network that's going to refer you? Because it's that referral that really makes a difference. And when someone is referring you into an organisation, they're putting their reputation on the line. I know for myself, I won't refer someone in to an organisation if I don't know them and trust that they're going to live up to what they say they can deliver. Because if they don't deliver, that then impacts my reputation and also my relationship with the person that I've referred them into. I'd rather have a smaller network that is depth and has quality as opposed to this massive network where in fact I don't actually really know them at all.
Thank you to both of you. It's been a great conversation.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Patricia.
Thank you, Patricia.
And joining me, Rupert French. He's the author of How to Get a Job After 50, and also Michelle Gibbings, who's the author of Step Up.